Hello and welcome to another episode of the Noizze podcast, sponsored by Stereo Brown Records. Today, we interview with Scott from Bleed From Within as I discuss their new album Shrine and a whole host of other things, including their upcoming tour and other stuff in the metal universe. It's a good one. Make sure you follow us at Noizze Podcast on Twitter, follow Noizze UK on Twitter as well as on Facebook. Check our podcast out on anywhere you get podcasts, including Spotify, Apple Music, Anchor, all the rest of it. And make sure you check us out on every available social media network as well as giving us a follow in all those relevant areas. Thank you so much. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Noizze podcast. We've got an interview today with the vocalist, Scott Kennedy of Bleed From Within. First of all, Scott, I just want to say thank you. Just a pleasure having you on. Thank you for giving your time. How was 2022?
Thank you for having me, man. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
It is absolutely wonderful to have you on here and having a chat with us and all that sort of thing. So first things first, how's 2022 been for Bleed From Within and yourself?
Do you know what? The start of the year has been very quiet. Like, obviously, we've been preparing to release this new album and stuff. We had a headline tour at the end of last year, and then we've been really quiet this year, just like getting everything in place because we want to make sure with this album release, because we're so proud of this album, we want to make sure that everything is like on point with the release schedules and all that stuff. So, but yeah, as I said to you before we joined, we fly out to Prague. Well, it's like tomorrow night, Friday morning we fly to Prague. We're playing a festival there on Saturday, so this will be the first show of the year.
Wow, first show of the year in May. That's crazy. So you guys must be chomping at the bit to get out there, right? I imagine you've been locked in studios and working on sort of like just finishing the songs and sort of all the production stuff. I imagine you are desperate to get out there.
I'm also quite stressed because we're playing all the new songs that we've released so far from this album, including the one that comes out tomorrow, and 3 of them we've never played as a band yet.
Wow.
So we'll be rehearsing them tomorrow night, and then we fly out like straight after rehearsals. So
that is ambitious, man. That is ambitious. Are there any in those sort of circumstances? Are there any particular moments where you're like, oh man, we need to? These are the bit that I'm kind of worried about. Is it like the fast parts, the blast beats? Is it the timing? Is it the vocals? Is it lyrics? What presents the biggest challenge in these sort of last minute preparations?
See, to be honest, we've been playing together now for that long. Like, we've been a band for coming up in 16 years, I think. So, and the one thing that we've always prided ourselves on is like being able to play our songs live, and that's the one thing we always really keep in mind when we're writing new songs for a new album. Like, we need to make sure that we can pull this off live. So I'm pretty confident that everything we've put in this new album it'll be a breeze. I mean, it might not be a breeze, but we'll pull it off. but
well, even
that comes out tomorrow. The one comes out tomorrow, Flesh and Stone. That's like probably one of the fastest ones in the album, so that'll probably be the biggest challenge. But I think we'll be all right.
Oh man, I hope the gig goes terrifically as well. Playing in Prague as well, like a European festival, that's a chance to be like the first real show of the year. That's a chance to be sort of like a defining show for the next sort of period, isn't it? Sort of set the tone a little bit. When it comes to the album coming out on the 3rd of June, you've got the album Shrine coming out. How would you talked about the meticulous nature that you're sort of approaching the putting the record together. So how would you define this project in comparison to some of the others then? Why is this particular one that you're spending almost extra time and extra preparation for? What makes this one different?
Do you know what we actually had the time with this one, because like every album we've ever written, we've pretty much written the album while being on tour, and like we've always been like proper up against it time wise to finish the album, because we're like you know, we're in the studio next month, we've got a tour next week, and then blah blah blah, just all these tours and deadlines and everything just adds up. But this one we wrote and recorded pretty much over lockdown, so we actually had a lot of time. And the one thing that we really wanted to make sure and really make a point of was just writing a completely like diverse album from start to finish. Like, we wanted to have songs on there that is like complete new territory for us. Like, for example, again, I go back to the song that we're releasing tomorrow, Flesh and Stone, almost has like a sort of symphonic black metal feel to it, and we've never done anything like that before. And yeah, I can't wait for people to hear it, because we really have covered a lot of new ground on this album, and I genuinely I know every band member probably says this in every interview, but I genuinely think we've written our best album by a country mile.
Is it just the diversity that sets it apart, or is there something else
No,
that you see in
it's
here?
the songs as well. Like, see, when we're writing an album, we try, like, the last thing we ever want to do is think about what other bands are doing, because then you end up
Yeah,
just
of course.
copying and ripping off other bands. I'm not saying any other band does that, but we certainly don't. Like, the one thing that we always try and set is like a sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Like a, not a benchmark. I guess you could say a benchmark. Like, we always, like, we set a standard
Mhm.
when we write an album, and then when we go to the next album, the goal was to just write a better album than the last one. So we take out, me personally, I don't really often listen to my own band, if I'm completely honest with you, but when it comes time to write a new album, I'll, like, listen to the last album and sort of take notes, like, okay, that the vocals I'm doing there, that's the stronger part, like the hooks, the sing along choruses, like the vocals and gaps leading into a breakdown. Like, I'll pick out all these parts that make the album good, in my opinion, like, from a vocal perspective, and then I just try and make sure I up that on the next album, and that's just always my, like, sort of method going into a new album.
You talk about upping the vocals. What does that actually mean, sort of, at the brass tack situation? Like, because we can just say ambiguously you want to do better, but what does that actually mean for you as a vocalist? Is it lyrics? Is it particular growls? Is it like versatility between going from sort of cleaner transitions to heavier ones? What does that actually mean?
So basically, when, like, take it the chorus for example, right? So say, look at the song "End of All We Know," right? So, like, from our last album, Fracture, that was at that point, it was probably one of the catchiest, most sing along choruses. I don't want to say commercial sounding, but in a way, you probably could say that. But
Yeah,
I hate
we'd
that,
say
because
pop sensibilities in the PR world, perhaps.
yeah, but I despise that, because the one, like, whenever I'm writing an album, whenever I'm writing a song for, like, or writing lyrics or putting vocals to a song, if something sounds too much like that, I always try and,
Yeah,
like, put
just
myself
swerve
off
away
it,
a little
because
bit.
yeah, because I never want to swerve away from the fact that we're a fucking metal band, and we're always
Yeah,
going to be a metal band, and I don't want, like, that's fine. I listen to pop music, I listen to, like, classic rock music, but we're a metal band, and that's who we're always going to
yeah.
be. So I always try and keep that in mind when I'm writing these choruses. But to go back to, obviously, I got off topic there.
No,
I
no,
just
me
always
too.
try and make sure that I'm writing bigger hooks, like, when it comes to the chorus. Like, so "End of All We Know," that was probably the biggest, like, chorus I'd written up to that point. Then on the new album, like, take "Levitate" for example, I think that chorus is 10 times catchier than the "End of All We Know" chorus. So just, like, looking at it from that perspective, like, I always just try and make sure the hook's bigger. And then if I've got, like, like a hook and, like, a gap in the song before a breakdown kicks in, like your standard, like, I can't even think of an example. Like, on Fracture, we had a song called "Into Nothing," and before the breakdown at the end, they've got, like, this big vocal hook in the gap,
Mhm.
and all the crowd were singing that live on our headline. So on this one, I'm like, if there's any gaps before breakdowns, I need to try and make sure that whatever I'm singing there sounds cooler, is, like, more pleasing on the ears. You know what I'm trying to say.
No, I
I'm gonna
absolutely do. No, I absolutely do. There are certain moments in the song that are like the defining moments of a song, and
exactly.
they're just points that you need to sort of grab on. I always think about. I was listening to Noizze by Architects yesterday, and that
Great
line where he
song.
talks about God clutching a razor blade has to be
Yeah,
there. And look at the fucking mess they made and all that type of stuff. It's mantra-esque. And if it was something that was
yeah,
less impactful that you couldn't stick on a poster and on the front of an album, that song doesn't have the same gravity. And you're absolutely
exactly,
right. You've got to pick the best lines, the shortest, most impactful stuff. It's almost like
exactly.
sloganism, almost. So you've got to sort of get
It
the
really
message
is.
right in the right times. You're
Yeah,
absolutely right.
and that's where, like, a lot of people probably don't realize how important lyrics are, because,
Mm-hmm.
like, that line you just said from Architects, that is such a great lyric, and it's just so important to have, like, your best lyrics, pick the right moments for your best lyrics in the song. It's fucking hard writing songs, to be quite honest with you, man. It's a challenge, and it's a total, like, mind maze at times, but when you pull it off, it's the most satisfying feeling in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the semantics of it as well, isn't it? So you sort of
Yeah.
I was reading some of the sort of information you got through the sort of the album that came through and the PR information and stuff like that. And there's an interesting quote I wanted to ask you about. Ali mentioned, or if I forgot if I pronounced his name wrong, forgive me. Mentioned the big thing was the production value going into this album.
Yep.
It does sound cleaner. It does. So for fans that are expecting the album to come out, what does that actually mean? How did you achieve that different production sound, and what was the conversations that led into those sort of decision making?
Well, like we knew we'd set a barrier with Fracture, and we started discussing like what kind of things we could do other than writing better songs that could take this album a step higher than Fracture. And one of the big things was having like choirs and orchestration and stuff on the album. So we hired, I believe, I hope to God I'm not getting this wrong, but I believe it was the Parallax Orchestra.
Right. Okay.
And they put loads of like strings and like real live strings and stuff on the album, and that, I think that's the one thing that properly brought this album to life. Other than the fact that I do think we did write better songs, but there's just a lot of stuff going on. There's like female choirs behind some of my vocals on the album and all that. That just sounds, it sounds epic. It just sounds so good, and yeah, just bringing all that stuff underneath our music on this album is just taking it to a pure different level for us.
It's got to be a magical experience to see those kind of musicians, like the extra stuff coming into the studio and seeing that. I remember I've seen a couple of classical concerts, like ones where they put music to films. Then I saw like a classical pianist and stuff, and I ended up just marveling at the musicianship. I stopped watching the film because these guys are like, I love metal as much as the next guy, more so than the average man. Let's be honest. But some of these classical musicians are just mind blowing, aren't they? Seeing them do their work.
They're untouchable. They're truly untouchable. Like I think my first experience with hearing like instruments like that in a metal band was Metallica's S&M album.
Yeah. Oh my God! Don't even get started on that. It's just unbelievable.
Exactly. And the way it brought their songs to life, and then you've got bands like Dimmu Borgir that do it a lot. Like they've got a live DVD where they've got like a live orchestra and stuff with them, and just hearing what it does to the songs, especially metal songs, it just makes it just sound so good. So that was just the one thing we knew we wanted to do that with this album.
It's just a delicacy to it, isn't it? Like I agree with you. I love it when it's done right and got that balance. And it's just that combination of the riffs and the musicianship in the background. I love it, and you've seen a bit more of that in modern metal recently. It's really good to see. Really good to see.
The one thing that's challenging though is like I know we did get really excited by it and want to overuse it. You need to know like when to use it and when to pull it back, because you can get carried away because it almost sounds good over everything, but you can't have it over everything or you're just totally ripping it. So that was the one thing that we learned, is just knowing when to use it and when to pull it back. Yeah,
it's got to accentuate, not sort of dominate, doesn't it? That's definitely the way that that's the way that it's got to be.
Exactly.
So you obviously mentioned this earlier. So your Fracture was 10 songs you wrote while touring. So obviously you wrote this. You sort of wrote this album. The pandemic had a bit more time. Was the writing process differently? So before, when you're sort of sitting on tour buses and traveling places, I imagine that is pardon the pun, but an incredibly fractured way of writing songs where you just got everything piecemeal coming together. Did you have more time to actually sit down as a group and sort of work things out and in a more collaborative sense?
Well, not really, because this was the only album where we've not been in a room writing the album. Like, I mean, that's not 100% true. Like we normally, the songs always start from Noizze, our guitar player, or Craig. The songs mostly always start from like him and Stephen. They'll like record sort of like a rough framework of a song in their bedroom, put like programmed drums, blah blah, send them, and then we would normally always like go into a studio, the full band together, and jam what he's written, and you kind of know what works and what doesn't when you play it together in a room. But obviously during the pandemic we couldn't do that with this album, so there was a lot of Zoom calls. Like we kind of did coming towards like the end of the pandemic, and like during like, you know, when the restrictions eased a bit, we did kind of get to jam them a wee bit, but nothing compared to what we've done before. But we had a lot more time to just sit with this, and like you know, like the one thing I've always like swore by is like going back to a song with like new ears and a new perspective, like because sometimes you like just have to write a song, you record it, you put it out, and you don't really get it. And sometimes that works, sometimes that's a good thing because you don't want to dwell on a song too much. But with this, I feel like we just had the right amount of time to like go back to it and like, you know, like just go through everything with a fine comb and
Yeah.
just know what works, know what doesn't. And yeah, I think we've managed to pull it off considering the circumstances in which we recorded and wrote the album under.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't even imagine working on a project this size in the sort of circumstances that you've been sort of put into, especially like going across like Zoom and sort of putting things across and sort of saying, I've got a bit here, I've got this riff here, and have it. But at least you've had that sort of time to sit back and really reflect and really evaluate where you're at. I was
Yeah,
having a look.
exactly.
I was having a look through the stuff on the album. So this is you've had this lineup since 2018's era.
Yeah.
How has that chemistry grown? I imagine like in the first couple of albums, it's still a new collection of people sort of figuring things out. I imagine now you're fairly comfortable 4 years down the line after that set lineup now. Has that
Yeah.
chemistry, especially over the pandemic, actually helped the writing process, helped the songs, helped the music, helped you guys out as a band?
Well, yeah, I guess, but like, so the only really member that changed was a guitar player. So obviously, when we did the Uprising album, we had Martin. He was a guitar player at the time. He obviously like just didn't. He couldn't really like make the time for the band anymore. His work was taking up a lot of his time. He's a guitar tech now, so he's like constantly out with bands like Architects, Devin Townsend, and it was just clashing a lot with our tours. So he just couldn't commit to anymore. And then we got well, to be fair, for a few years, all the writing for the album era fell on Noizze, and it was getting to a point now where, because we were originally thinking, could we continue as a 4-piece, and then Noizze was like, this is a lot of pressure, I need someone to sort of bounce off of. Like, I've always been used to that, and I would like to continue writing with someone there just to get to, you know, like to get some inspiration from. And we tried out a few people, and Stephen was just honestly, like, from the moment, like, we said to the people we're trying out, like, can you come in for a jam, play through some of our songs with us in the practice space, and then write a song, because that was the most important thing, was getting someone to help Noizze write. So like, write a song that you think's a Bleach Within song, and some of them were great, but Stephen came in with a song called Ruina that actually just became on the, like, that song, just the way he wrote it in the demo was exactly the way it went onto the album era.
Wow.
And it was just amazing. And like the chemistry we had with him instantly just felt like perfect, because he plays in another band from Glasgow called From Sorrow to Serenity. So we'd done a lot of shows with them, so we knew Stephen. And so just literally from the moment he joined the band, it's just been like we've known him our whole life. And yeah, as obviously the years have passed, he's became like obviously a more comfortable and confident member within the band. And yeah, it's only got better. And this new album is the album that he's written the most material for as well. So yeah.
Oh wow! So it
to answer
sounds
your
like
question, yes.
Well, actually, yeah, it does sound like this is the album actually you feel the best about, that also has involved the most writing contributions from as much of the band as possible, as that definitely seems to have contributed to the diverse sound of the album as well, I assume.
Yeah, 100%.
So there are
there's
songs.
A song on there. There's a song in the new album that Ali wrote some of the riffs for, and we've never done that before. The riffs have always came from Noizze or Stephen or other guitar players, but Ali actually wrote, like, Ali's not really a good guitar player, but he was kind of like humming the riff out. Like, yeah, I can't even remember what the riff goes like now, but he was like sort of humming it in a voice note, and then Noizze sort of worked it out on guitar, but the actual riff was essentially written by Ali, and we've never did that before. So
that's fantastic, though. That is. That's got to be that's got to be brilliant for the band, though. To because I like, it's nice to have every member sort of contributing and having their own say. Like I used to be a drummer in bands. And you just sit around like Ringo Starr in that Beatles documentary, just waiting for John Lennon to sort everything out. And it's it's that kind of situation where you kind of you love being involved and having that opportunity to sort of collaborate. That's got to be such like a massive thing. It's got to really help. So are there songs where you listen to, and obviously but where it's easy to identify, oh, that's come from this member, and that's a riff that only so and so could write, and that's you know what I mean? Are they easily identifiable, that type of thing?
Yeah, for me it is now. Yeah, like the song we're releasing tomorrow, I keep going back to this song, Flesh and Stone. Stephen wrote that song, and there's another song on the album called Death Defined. It's got a weird, like really techie, sort of almost Meshuggah-esque style riff. And it's, again, Stephen wrote that, because Stephen's other band are like a sort of tech metal band. So you can always hear that sort of weird time signatures, like really dark, synths and melodies going through his songs, and then Gunsey just has his like straight up signature sound, like just sounds like a Bleed From Within song, and I feel like Gunsey's just always had that. So yeah, I can totally tell the difference.
That's terrific.
People
That's
might
terrific.
not be able to, but
no, I think actually if you've got Bleed From Within like hardcore fans that have followed you since, I think they can actually start to see the pattern where sort of bands start diversifying their sound and things like that. And I think that's a really rewarding experience as a fan as well. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that actually, the way that you see sort of the albums and the journey of the band. Because Shrine, I think it was you that maybe might have made the quote, but I can't quite remember from the PR notes. But it says you mentioned that Shrine was a trilogy with Fractures and Error, where like, Shrine sort of brings these three together. Does that mean that you consider this like a closing chapter? Are you sort of bringing these themes, bringing these musical ideas to a close? And does that imply that the next album is going to be almost like a complete removal, a new kind of chapter, that type of thing? So where do you sit with that?
in terms of our journey, yes, but because like, so we've not really kept it any secret. Like before we released Era, we had quite a tough time as a band. We pretty much had broken up, to be quite honest with you. The band was pretty much done. Yeah, and we just went through a lot of like, obviously can't really go into it too much, but a lot of like,
no, of course,
legal issues that we had, and with previous like record labels, etc. Not so much. Anyway, it was a difficult time for the band, and we had written like maybe 6 or 7 rough demos for Era, and we thought they were amazing. We were like, these are the great songs we've written. Why don't we just release it and see what happens? We released it. It done so well. Like we put just a small run of headline shows. They all sold out. So we'd never done that before. We'd never like sold out a full headline tour. It was actually rare when we sold out a show before that. So we released Era, put on a small run of headline shows. They all sold out. It was great, but the actual content within the album was very negative because of the place we were before like that album sort of came out. So naturally that's going to like influence your writing. Fracture again was quite a negative album in terms of where we were like as a band and a headspace and blah blah. This album is the bit like when we're writing this album, we are literally in the best like place we could possibly be as a band. This album is such a positive album, and that's where the name Shrine comes from. It's just like a moment in time where we realize like this is finally going well. So 10 years from now, we'll look back in this album and see this as like the defining point where things were starting to finally go good for the band. And yeah, and in terms of journey, so after this, it's just like who knows where it's going to go, but it's like the first positive album we've written over the last 3 albums, essentially.
It's phenomenal that you've actually managed to carve out some incredibly positive experiences from negative moments with the band. That you talk about Error being like a negative experience, but then it literally turned the corner for your whole group. And I imagine sort of pulled you back together with these headline shows and that type of stuff. It's astonishing that you've managed to have this kind of cathartic response when usually people just like, we're going to get these out, just fuck it off, and then we'll just maybe have a conversation 6 to 8 months when I get my head right. And bands just slip away that way, don't they? They just lose contact. Exactly. It's fantastic you actually managed to have that opposite.
And it wasn't even just like from our perspective as well. It was like, see, after Fracture came out, like that was up to this point. But I guess we'll see what happens with Shrine. But the album did so well, man, considering it came out over lockdown. Like we've never, like basically before we released Era, or when we released Era, I think we were getting like maybe 8,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. Since Fractures came out, it's like 500,000 monthly listeners every month, and that's never really dropped since Fracture came out. So that's a huge jump. That album came out and it was just doing so well for us, that album. But every time we were doing press, every time we were doing just interviews, press, it was just people were just constantly talking about the 5-year gap between Uprising and Era, and it's like, since we released that album, we've arguably been one of the like most like consistently busy bands in the UK metal scene. Like constantly churning out content, try to play as many shows as we possibly can, but everyone is still focusing on the 5-year gap that we had between Uprising and Era. So that's when now it comes to Shrine, we're like, that is the end of that chapter. Like just be done with it. We're in a great place now. We're ready for whatever's going to come to us. And then we've learned a lot from that experience as well. Like it would take an awful lot for us to get back into that position again. I don't think we ever could. So I think that's the whole meaning of Shrine, kind of wrapped up in one like wee blurb essentially.
No, that's really brilliant. Thank you for such a detailed answer as well, sort of going into the meaning of the record and stuff. You kind of, I love it when we have interviews and I have to ask like 4 questions and you just answer the 17 unanswered questions that I didn't even have to get to. That's just absolutely wonderful.
Don't get me wrong, the album sounds pissed off. It sounds aggressive because it's a metal album.
Yeah, no one's expecting a reggae album. Don't worry. Don't worry about it, man.
The album does sound pretty pissed off and aggressive, but there is like a really positive message running through the album, which we've never really done before. So.
It's a reflection of where you are right now, and I think that's wonderful news. So
yeah.
I'm gonna get you out on this. So obviously you're talking about turning the corner, positive mindset, moving forward. First big gig starts Monday, Prague, flying away, all that type of stuff. Where does the rest of 22 sit for Bleed From Within and moving beyond that?
So right now the big focus is just getting the album out. That's like obviously a lot of emotions are around that. Like I'm excited, so excited for people to hear the album. I'm also really nervous because I just want people to like it because I think it's our best work. Then all throughout the summer we're doing like all the kind of major festivals in Europe. We're doing Download Festival. Then we've got some plans for after that, but nothing's announced yet. And then at the end of the year, we are doing a full European, like mainland Europe headline tour, which was supposed to be the Fracture tour, but because of obviously the pandemic and stuff, it kept getting pushed back. The Fracture tour is now happening after Shrine is coming out, so it's now the Shrine tour. But we'll still be obviously putting a lot of focus on Fracture songs on that tour.
Wow, that's phenomenal. You must be buzzing. You must be buzzing the rest of the year. It'd be fantastic.
Man. There's a lot of exciting stuff in the pipeline as well that's not announced yet, so it's looking to be a good year.
Nice little tease to finish. Well, I wanted to just say thank you for your time. Thank you for talking to us. It's been a real pleasure discussing the album, man. And next time, if you're around for any media availability, we'd love to have you on again and discuss how the tours went and moving forward with the album and things like that. But thank you so much, Scott. Scott Kennedy, Bleed From Within. Thank you so much, my man.
Thank you so much, mate. It's been a pleasure, man.